I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you. Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Tim Best. Tim has 15 years in real estate investing and development, also a background in IT, which we were discussing a little bit prior to starting recording. Tim, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Hey Jason, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Great. So Tim, if you would, can you kind of just give us, tell us the story of your background, and then we'll talk about, kind of whatever we feel like is interesting to us.
Yeah, sure. So since you mentioned IT, yeah, I've been in the IT world for 23 years. Got out of college in '98, and other than a very brief stint as a process engineer in a manufacturing plant, have been working in IT ever since. Going around the country doing implementations for IBM, small startups, large Fortune 50 companies, that type of thing. And actually have been investing and doing some sort of real estate for about 15 years now. Around 2006, met a couple of guys at a company I was working for, all of us little IT guys with a little extra income. And so we decided to pull it together and go invest in some land development opportunities at the time. Went really, really well till about 2008. And if that date rings a bell with anybody.
Yeah. For everyone in real estate, that rings a bell. Yeah.
You were probably in real estate at the time in some way, shape, or form. That went really well to about 2008. Things went south pretty quick. Fortunately, I'll say fortunately, because it's one thing when you lose your own money. We were only using our own money at the time, so I never had to explain to investors what happened. So thankfully on that. But then around 2010, pivoted into fix and flip, single family, just primarily because there was so much opportunity in that at the time.
Yeah.
Coming out of that real estate kind of bubble, there was a lot of opportunity on the other side of it for, if you were in a position to do something there. And then around about 2017, decided to make a pivot into some other area of real estate, and did a little analysis in 2018, decided I was going to jump into multifamily, and have been doing multifamily ever since. And here we are.
Awesome. So yeah, you sort of ran the gamut there throughout, and I feel like that's kind of common. People do a little bit here and there. I mean, I similarly, did some fix and flips, some live-in flips, did some house hacking, that stuff. And
Sure.
Then you eventually realize that that's not necessarily scalable. It's not necessarily doesn't free up your time the way you might want it to. So you started with some guys you worked with, kind of got into partnering in land development. How did you, I actually really haven't got to talk about any sort of land develop type stuff on the show very much. What drew you to it, and kind of what did you guys do there? What was the process? And maybe it's different now than it was then.
No, in fact, I still see a lot of it going on. In fact, in one of my passive investments right now, I'm in a land fund, which quite frankly is backed by something very similar to what we were doing. And for a lot of folks that don't know, because usually when people see land being offered in some way, shape, or form, they'll either see a sign on the side of the road of 23 acres for sale, and it's just a bunch of trees or a field, or they'll see, I'll just use a big builder that everybody tends to know, like D.R. Horton, this 200 home community. What a lot of folks don't realize is that somebody probably found that opportunity for D.R. Horton They found that land. They negotiated the the purchase of the land or procuring and securing it, and then went out and shopped it to a developer, to a builder like a DR Horton. We were doing something similar, uh, primarily in the North Carolina mountains and the coast of the Carolinas, in North and South Carolina, down on the eastern side of the states. And at the time, and it's still true today, but at the time, there are a lot of people from the Northeast retiring, and from Ohio retiring into the Carolinas, either in the mountains or the coast. And so there was a lot of demand for it. And so we would work to go identify these properties, this land. We'd get it under contract in some way, shape, or form, and or another developer would, and they'd partner with us to leverage our credit and capital to put in infrastructure to prep the land for development. And then they'd go offer that to like a DR Horton or a builder of some sort. Um, so we were coming in that phase, and helping, get through kind of phase one, if you will. And then we would exit out about the time the developer came in, bought it, and got ready to actually build on it.
It's very interesting. I think maybe I was peripherally aware of how things work in that, in that process, but I think probably a lot of people don't realize the steps. I mean, even the steps to just taking raw land and then getting it to the point where it can be developed, whether that's, zoning or I don't, were you involved in sort of getting, whether it be power or sewer or anything like that to the land, or that was kind of once the developer got there?
Um, yes and no. We rarely work to do that piece of it. Usually that was on the development side. It was more common that someone had or someone had the land kind of under contract, and they'd kind of reach a point where they're like, all right, we've already deployed our capital to get under contract. Now we need somebody else's capital to put this infrastructure in place. And that's where they would come to us. And that, so we would use, again, our credit and our capital to help them do that piece of it. So essentially they were bringing us in a partnership. And then, the whole exit strategy was, now we're going to go find a developer and a lot of times they already had a developer in mind, to then take the land to the general market. So there it was low risk up front from the standpoint of, generally the business plan was in place, and as long as the market was okay, and everybody was doing all right, then things happened pretty seamlessly. It's when the market tightened up, the market crashed, some of the developers went out of business, and then lending just became impossible.
Yeah.
And then, quite frankly, there was just such an overabundance of real estate at the time. Not real estate in terms of land, but homes available, that when the market crashed, there was just this flood, right, of available inventory that everybody was going, why would I build anything? So that's kind of what we ran into at that point.
Yeah, it wasn't a great time for developers. I think specifically that was they got hit maybe the hardest in of all the real estate groups. I think at the time, just that nobody wanted you to build anymore, because it was like, what, we have all this excess, right? And there was no demand.
Yeah, so interesting. Kind of sad, but interesting. It was so that was about 2008. Around 2012, just happened to be in the North Carolina mountains for vacation or whatever, and we happened to be close to a place that we had under contract when 2008 hit. And I was like, I wonder what it looks like. And I went by there, and uh, rope across the entrance, beautifully paved roads, overgrown lots. And it had been that way for 4 years at that point in time.
But you didn't own it. You had gotten it under contract and sort of got out, or are you sold
No,
it to someone
that's
else?
one of the ones that we were in partnership with at the time, and we had helped fund those beautifully paved roads.
Yeah,
uh,
nice.
we had, but it was still sitting just like it was in 2008 when the market crashed.
Do you know what it looks like now?
I haven't been by there since
Yeah. I
then.
was like, I bet it's nice now. I bet it,
I'm
I bet it's
oh yeah, I'm sure now,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah. Awesome. So okay, so you managed to get through the crash without getting, sort of ruined on real estate. You continued with it. So then you were into, kind of the single family stuff, and what made you go from that to multifamily? What kind of made you make that switch?
So stop me if you've heard this one before. Scalability. Um,
Right. It's the common answer to this question, but
yeah,
it's very important. I mean, there's a big reason for it.
yeah, yeah. So scalability, honestly. I just, again, stop me if you've heard this, but I had created another job for myself. I quickly saw that I wasn't going to be able to scale. Um, I was running into issues with, with an 800 plus credit score. I was running into issues getting lending just because, hey, Mr. Vest, you've got this number of properties under your name or, under your own credit, that type of thing. Um, and then at the end of the day, you buy a property here, you buy a property here, and you try to do economies of scale, but that's really difficult in single family. I wasn't able to put ex, you know, external property management on it, or at least not at a price point that made sense.
Yeah.
Because they want to charge 15%, maybe more. And sometimes that it's like, man, that really eats into things. So at the end of the day, I just looked at it and said, maybe time to look at something else. And I had been toying with it for a while anyway. I knew that I never wanted to own a portfolio of like 50 single family homes.
Yeah.
Um, I knew that I wanted to go bigger, and try to do things that didn't necessarily require my own, social security number and credit score to support it.
Yeah.
So I started looking, and in full disclosure, I was looking at things like flex industrial, self storage. I was looking at a number of things like that.
And so but you landed in on multifamily. That's sort of your focus.
Yeah, specifically because when I started looking at things, I wanted to look for something that had probably the most seamless transition, and quite frankly, you know, single family to multifamily, a lot of similarities. Um,
Right.
a lot of similarities. You're dealing with tenants. You're dealing with roofs and toilets and HVACs, and
Right.
when I show up on a multifamily property and I'm doing a due diligence walking an apartment unit is really not that much different than walking a house, right? I'm going to check out the HVACs. I'm going to check out, the plumbing. I'm going to check out, we're going to scope some lines, things like that. It carries over pretty nicely. And then talking with, third party property management on a multifamily property. Hey, guess what? I property manage my own single family homes. A lot of that carries over. And in fact, I'm able to push them in some ways to say,
Yeah.
hey, this is what we were doing over here. You got to tell me, you're going to have to come up with a pretty good reason why you can't do that over here. Um, so a lot of it carries over and translates.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like a bunch of little houses, right? All put to
Yeah.
all put
Yeah.
together under one roof, right? So you don't have 25 roofs. You have one roof over 25 apartments in each building. That kind of it's so it, yeah, it's very much. I agree that the similarities are there. It's just, as you said, it's the scalability of it. It's that your property management fee goes from 10 or 15% on a single family house to 3 or 4% on large multifamily. So it's all of that is factors into your ability to really treat it as a business.
Yeah, and truly, it's in some ways, it's actually easier in some ways. Like I'll give you an example of, when that summer storm rolls through and the hailstorm hits, right? Like instead of driving to 10 different properties to check out the roof on each individual house,
Yeah.
I just go to the one and okay, it looks all right. We'll go, right? So
Yeah.
in some ways, it's easier like that.
Yeah, for sure. So when you kind of made that decision, how did you get started? How did you kind of functionally flip that switch?
Yeah, so sold off my portfolio. Um, sold off my portfolio. And then the only lesson learned there is, boy, hindsight, right? Like this, if I would have still had those things this past year, oh my goodness, I could have doubled my money.
Right.
But hey, uh, in all seriousness, the way I did that is I sold off my portfolio. I actually kind of took a lesson from 2006 through 2008, and I said, I know things translate, but at the same time, there's stuff about this that I don't know. Specifically, hey, I don't know how to do a syndication. I'm educated on it. I've read all the books everybody else read. I've read all the stuff on the internet that everybody else has read. But if I'm going to go out and get somebody else's money to invest in these properties, I want to have some pretty strong mentorship and coaching behind me. Because one of the things coming out of like 2006, 2008 that I realized is, had I had some stronger mentorship behind me, maybe I would have avoided a couple of things. So going into this, I said, I want to go get a good mentor. So I spent quite a fair amount of time kind of researching who that would be, whose group I wanted to be involved with. Did I want to go into some big, large mastermind, or did I want to get kind of more of an intimate group with more direct access to the guy, the coach? And ultimately, I ended up landing with a smaller mastermind where I really had access to the main guy, the guy who had been doing it himself for 20 plus years. And, we had a lot of one-on-one conversations, and it took quite a bit of time to get there, to make that decision. So um, that's where I spent a good portion of, say, 2018 was doing that research and landing on that decision.
Great. Yeah. And I think obviously the mentorship program that you choose is, individual to each person in regards to what you're actually looking for. But I think it
Mhm.
really speaks what you're saying about sort of doing that research and making sure you're getting into the situation that most will benefit you as you make that investment in yourself is a really good point, and very important for people. I think there is a lot of talk about mentorship. There's lots of gurus out there and stuff. You see all this stuff where um, you know people making promises that they can help you, become a billionaire with, but it's the reality is you have to a little bit know yourself and know what's going to work for you in terms of getting you going.
Oh yeah, yeah. And I think you're hitting on something spot on there. Is like, you got to know yourself. You got to know what you need, and what's going to help you get started. Because again, not all mentorships are or masterminds are the same, are created equal. And even from the standpoint of like, each one may be right or wrong for you for where you are at that in your stage of development, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, for some reason, I just kind of knew for me, because I'm a bit of an introvert, um, and so like the thought of going out and raising capital from somebody, for me, could actually make me sweat. And I'm like, nah, I don't want to do that. And so
I understand that well.
so I really yeah. So I really kind of leaned towards, with my first mentor, I kind of leaned towards someone who would help me get over that. Because one thing I do know about syndications or getting into multifamily, it scales a lot quicker if you can do it with partnerships through syndications,
Yep.
utilizing investor capital. Um, I knew I wanted to do that, so I kind of sought someone out who was pretty good at that.
Yeah, no, it's a good idea. And yeah, it's so important that you find the mentorship that is going to, if you're an introvert, as it seems we both are, probably you need someone who's going to bring you out of that shell a little bit to make the capital raising part of it not quite the terrifying experience that I feel like it can be in the beginning, or at least it was for me. So yeah, I completely agree. That's the right way to approach mentorship, is finding something that's going to actually help you, and finding whether you want, that sort of individual attention, or you're, joining one of the groups that has just a ton of people, and you're gonna be good at connecting with those people, and that's, each person's individual. So good. So you felt like, though, that having a mentor helped you.
Oh yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I definitely think it did. Yeah, 100%, 100%.
yeah.
Um,
And do you think that, because this is a thing that I've thought about in terms of mentorship, do you think that you could have done it anyway, but it saves you time and perhaps mistakes? Or do you think there's even more value to it than just, sort of that simplification?
yeah. So could I have done it anyway? 100%. Absolutely. I don't know if this applies to everybody. I know me. I'm pretty good at sitting down and reading through something, getting the principles and the basics down, having a fairly good understanding and being able to move forward. Um, when I got into IT, the way that happened was they were like, "Hey, anybody know how to use a computer?" Okay, I raised my hand and they sent me home. They sent me home with a stack of user guides that were like that big, and I came back on Monday and I was the company's IT expert at that point in time. So, I have an ability to be able to do
Yeah,
that. So could I have just read stuff on the internet, bought some books, move forward with some syndications? Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Could have stumbled through setting up my first syndication, from the legal documents and things like that. Lawyers pretty much handle that for you anyway. Um, but would I have been as effective? Probably not. Would I have scaled as quickly as I have? Definitely not. Um, that's 100% for sure.
yeah,
So yeah, I think from, I'm just a true believer in like invest in yourself. And if I was going to do this, and especially, I'll go back and say it again, especially if I'm going to do it and utilize other people's money, I'm going to have investors, it's probably a good thing for me to go invest in that, right? And have that guidance there. So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, the short of the answer is yeah, absolutely. I could have done it without a mentor.
Mhm.
Um,
But I think you I think you actually answered the question that I was trying to ask, in that what yes, you can do it on your own, and you hear people say that, like, oh, I can figure this out, and it's probably true. Like, it's not, you can read books, it's not, it's not rocket science, whatever, whatever you want to call it. But the point is, you are, if you're doing a syndication, you are becoming the steward of other people's money. You want to have, you want to make as few mistakes as you possibly can. You don't know what you know when you get going, and in the end, it's like the speed and the scale that you'll be able to achieve with the help and the team and the mentorship, I think is really kind of dramatically different than just sort of figuring it out on your own. So
yeah. And I'll take a little bit of that from the IT world because, what I'll say in the IT world is, if you look at IT development 20 years ago, it was kind of like, let me go hire a coder and a guy and a tester and then blah blah blah, and I'm gonna build a team, and then we're all gonna sit down and we're gonna struggle through this, and we're gonna struggle through it before we put something out. It may be 2 years before we put a product out, right?
yeah,
Instead, like what the way it's kind of pivoted today is, rather than build those teams, there's companies out there who have done that, who have that expertise in house, and it may cost you a little more upfront, but you're going to get a product sooner and it's going to be better because you're leveraging expertise of people who have been there, done that, and they've already got the team set up and in place. And that's kind of the same thing with the mentor approach, right? Like I use the guy I worked with. His name was Mike, who I partnered up with, or I had as a mentor very early on. Mike had been doing it for 20 plus years. He started on his own without a mentor, but by the time I had linked up with him, that's 20 years of mistakes and lessons learned and all of that I was ever able to leverage right there on the spot. So I was that learning curve that he went through. I was able to avoid some of that, and hit the ground running. So I'm scaling up faster than he did.
yeah,
Um, and that's all credit to that kind of relationship and leveraging that up front.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a great point. And I think, um, you get to leverage their experience and the mistakes that they have made. You also get to leverage their connections, right? So like, they've already, that, you spoke of the team, they already have the ancillary people that you need to get a syndication done, the syndication attorney, the property management groups, the, whatever it is, the lenders, all of that stuff that sure, you might be able to go out and find one, but people with experience already have that sort of list of go-to people that get it done, and that's also a very important connection to have, I think. So in terms of that, speed and scalability, um, how long did it take you to kind of get to that first deal, which I think is often a big milestone for people?
Oh, so in there, you kind of have COVID going on. Um, there was whole lot of like sitting on the sidelines for folks during COVID.
Yep.
Just a lot of unknown. Um, what I would what I would say is one of the things that one of my primary business partner and I did was during COVID, we kind of said, hey, if there's not going to be a lot of deals to be had or people aren't doing a lot of things, we want to like focus on growing our network and our team. We want to focus on finding the right who's on for syndication, and we spent a lot of time doing that. So it's kind of a long way of answering your question. Of it probably took a good 2 years between mentors and growing our network and stuff before we nailed down that first deal. Um, as a partnership, we'd each done some smaller stuff individually. Like my primary partner, he's probably done 40 plus deals over the last 8 years. And those range anywhere from, duplexes up to 20 units, properties. So, between the two of us, we've done quite a bit over, that period of time. But as far as really getting into the multifamily space, it probably took us about 2 years before we get that first deal under our belt.
Yeah. And I think that's important for people to hear, especially that are getting started, that it's not a quick thing. It takes time, it takes persistence, it takes hard work to get there, right? To get started, essentially. There's a lot of, you're going to put a lot into it before you see much. But then, so where's your portfolio at now, and kind of how to maybe talk about how that scale happened? Because I do think, that once you get one, then it tends to go pretty quick.
Yeah. I was, if you hadn't said it, I was going to. I always like to preface this because people always say, hey, how many units do you own? Right. So even when you're an LP, you technically own units, right? So what I would tell folks is, so ownership wise, I have close to 900 units. Under my active management, assets under management, I'm just under 400 at this point. And how we got there was, you just hit on it, was the power of that first deal. We struggled for the longest time to nail down that first deal for lots of reasons, none of which were, a kind of a hesitancy on our part to get the first deal. We were ready to go. It was just getting brokers to take us serious enough, things like that.
Yeah.
But once we got that first one, we quickly got the second one, and then the third one, and then the next thing you know, we had closed on 6 deals within 7 months from doing the first one.
Yeah.
And it's all like, it's deal momentum, right? And it's truly, it's a true thing for sure. You get that first one under your belt, and then all of a sudden, some of the sellers, some of the brokers that have kind of been watching you, maybe like, I can't tell if he's a tire kicker or not.
Right.
All of a sudden they're reaching out to you. I can tell you, when we closed on our first one and we said, hey, closed on our first deal, awesome. Literally that day, I started getting calls. Things started showing up in my email that had never shown up before. On LinkedIn, people started, brokers started connecting with me. Hey, I got something I want you to look at. And it snowballed from there.
Yeah. No, some really great points there, because it's like you spent, like you said, about 2 years to close the first one, and then 6 deals in, what do you say, 6 deals in 6 months or so.
7 months. Yeah.
7 months. Yeah. Like that's kind of how it goes, right? It's, that's very good. That's a lot of deals right off the bat, but but that story kind of keeps coming up within, sort of within the syndication space. It's like, once people realize that you are serious and you can close, then it's like, hey, you as you said, you're starting to see things in your inbox that you didn't see before. You're hearing from people you had never heard before. It's kind of a really a fascinating process how that works, and it's encouraging, right? It's encouraging to the people that are getting started to know that it's like, just hang in there, get the first one, and from there it'll snowball, and you'll be, you'll be able to scale. That was fast when that started to happen. And you talked about kind of building your relationships and network in the meantime. How do you feel about that, quick scaling? How has that gone for you? I know sometimes it's like you can get pretty overwhelmed in terms of the amount of work it takes to get a deal closed and then manage it and everything like that. And if you go from, having none to suddenly 6 deals in 7 months, how did that growth kind of feel? What did you do to handle that?
So the growth felt awesome. The growth, it was kind of one of those, hey, everything we've been working for is starting to happen. Um, so that, I don't want to lie to anybody. That's certainly there. That was great. But then it starts to become real, right? You start to realize I got a business going on. This isn't a hobby. I got a business going on, whether I like it or not.
Right.
Um, and I gotta run it like a business. So quickly, what starts to become apparent is I can't wear all the hats in this business anymore. I've got to start turning some things over. It's all part of scaling. One of the first places that we saw it, and I'll give you two examples or two places. One of the first places that we saw it was our underwriting. As anybody who's listening may know, um, when you're trying to get that first deal, you're probably underwriting 10 deals a week, 20 deals a week, 30 properties. I mean, if we could screen share easily, I'd show you, like, I got a folder that's hundreds of properties long that never came true, but one of the first things that started to suffer was our underwriting. If you're not underwriting, you're not getting LOIs out, right? So that's one of the first things that started to suffer. The second thing that started to suffer for us is once you get a deal under your management, a lot of folks talk about, oh, you're putting third party management on it. It's easier to handle and stuff. And that's true, but you still got to asset manage this thing. You still have a commitment to your investors, to your partnership team. Your job is to make sure that the property manager is delivering on your business plan the way you set it up. So those quickly became, that started to quickly snowball on us as well, to the point where we're like, hey, one of the first places we need to look to expand and bring somebody in is on the asset management piece. And quite frankly, I have 3 other mentors right now. And that was one of the first things before we even saw it come to a reality. That's one of the first things. I think it was around our third or fourth deal. He was like, you guys are going to need an asset manager pretty soon. And about 2 deals later, we went back and we were like, I think we're there. You know, so that's probably what we saw the quickest. The underwriting started to suffer, and asset management started to take up more and more time.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, it's like you're going to have probably at least a weekly meeting with your property management group in the beginning, a takeover, and also, depending on how much of a value add it is, how much of a heavy lift you're going to have more contact than even that. So it is a lot of time consuming. You're not there, you're not swinging the hammers, you're not doing the work, but there's a lot of true managing that needs to happen. And so every deal you add into that, it's like that time it just keeps multiplying. So yeah, I can imagine that gets sort of very quickly becomes, you need the extra help, or you just are going to drown, and the deal's going to suffer, right? Like your investors aren't going to get as good of a return if you're not managing it well.
Yeah. Especially like you said, if there's a strong value add component to it, you better be on top of the asset management, because nobody's I don't care how good your property manager is. Nobody's going to push that the way you are. Um, and then sometimes, quite frankly, the property managers can get too aggressive, right? We had a situation recently where, um, we're like, why? This market's got people on waiting lists. Why is this unit? Um, why is this unit sitting 45 days vacant? And we find out that, well, we offered it at 1,500 a month, but the market's at like, but we underwrote year one to 1,350. Why are we
Right.
going after 1,500?
Right.
What we can't have is vacancy. Um,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
and
Vacancy is the most expensive thing, right?
yeah, so even from there, it's like, hey, I appreciate you trying, but if we hit, let's take it down to 1395, and if we hit that, we've exceeded our year one expectation already.
Right.
So,
Right.
little things like that too. It doesn't even have to be swinging hammers or changing out cabinets. There's some other things that you got to stay on top of your property managers about as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. And it's yeah, all of it. It's there's sort of the physical property side, and then there's the tenant side of it too, where it's just like you said, what are the right rents to have to keep your occupancy up, but maximize the rents, and make sure people are paying rent, and if there's delinquencies and things like that. It's a lot to kind of keep on top of, and every deal that you add in is going to get become exponentially harder to keep up with that yourself. So
Yeah.
yeah, makes total sense. I think a lot of people, myself included, do struggle with that, kind of what to do from a scaling component, right? You're
Yeah.
like, I want to do this. I really want to. And in the beginning, you don't have any revenue coming in, so you're probably nervous about hiring people. But then suddenly it's like, well, if the deals are coming that quickly, you need to do something to keep up with them. So I appreciate that, sort of advice and insight into what you've done, because I think that can help people, uh, as they grow as well.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Yeah.
cool. Tim, let's maybe switch gears a little bit. I have a series of questions that I like to ask each guest. The first one is based on the name of the show, being Know Your Why. What is your why? What drives you? What's kind of motivating you to build with such speed and scale?
So part of my why is actually in a room right now studying for a midterm. Uh, I think it's a math 3 midterm. So, good luck to her on that one. But that's my that's my 13-year-old daughter, Payton. She's a big part of my why. And I think that's an easy one for a lot of people to get to. I can see in the background, looks like you probably have some
Yep.
kids,
Yep.
at least one.
Yep. That is
Um,
also, yeah, my kids are my why as well. It's or part of it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then the other part of my why is, I think it was just kind of ingrained in me. My dad was always trying to do something on his own, whether it be cutting wood for people or going down to the beaches in the summer and building decks for people to make extra money, stuff like that. My dad just kind of had this entrepreneurial spirit. It carried over into me and my brothers. So I think wanting to do something on my own, have something as a legacy to hand over to my daughter, and then just to kind of provide her with, a more opportunity than I had. I think that's the big part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fantastic. Kids are a great motivator. They really, they
Yeah.
definitely give you a different perspective on. My kids are young; they're 2.5 and 6 months old, so they're a bit younger. But yeah, I think that the goal is the same, right? To give them a better life than we had, and that doesn't necessarily even mean just financially. It's just like education and access to opportunities, I think. So very, very cool. I can relate to that one well.
Yeah.
um, well, tell the listeners something about yourself that isn't common knowledge, like a hobby or a special skill, or even something that you want to pick up.
Oh boy. Hobby or special skill. Here's one that people pick on me about. Um, so feel free to hound me on this one. So I was in a Hallmark Christmas movie. Um,
That's awesome.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it was, and it was a particularly bad one. So that even adds to it. But yeah, so every now and then there's a little local group around the Charlotte area that when movies are filming in town, they go in and we get to be extras on sets. So I'll go do that every now and then. And honestly, for me, it's a fun thing to do, but it's a personal development thing for me because I mentioned earlier I'm a bit of an introvert.
Yeah.
So getting in front of a crew and a camera, even in the background, acting in some way, shape, or form, that does not come natural to me. It's not comfortable for me. So I do it sometimes just to push myself a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to kind of get outside your comfort zone. But what movie? So we can all look
Oh
and
boy,
we
it
can
was
find
called
you.
a Nashville Christmas Carol.
Okay.
So if you can imagine, it is the Christmas Carol story with the ghosts and everything
Gotcha.
in a Hallmark Nashville Christmas setting.
And it was filmed in Charlotte, or were
It
you in Nashville
was.
at the time?
So it was filmed in the Nashville movie was filmed in downtown Charlotte and in the heat of early September. Um,
Nice. My wife's from Charlotte. I know it's not snowy or wintry in September in Charlotte. I
yeah, hiding the
it's funny.
sweat as we're wearing those winter jackets was
Yeah,
not easy.
exactly. I'm sure. I'm sure. That's very funny. That's actually very, very interesting. I'll have to check out that movie and see if I can find you. Um, how can people reach you if they're looking to connect? Whether that's to dive into your story more, or even as investors, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So definitely not through SAG because I don't have a card. But
Not yet. Not
not
yet.
yet. Yeah. One day. No. So yeah, on LinkedIn, just under my name, Tim Vest, and you can grab me through my website as well, harvestpg.com, and that's harvest. Paul is in P is in Paul, G is in George.com, and tvest at harvestpg.com. My information's there. Calendly links as well. So if you ever want to just schedule some time and chat, I'm always up for that.
Okay, cool. Last question, Tim. What piece of advice would you give to someone who's, I guess, where you were, a year ago, somewhere at the beginning of their journey? What would you tell them to kind of give them some motivation and inspiration to keep going forward?
So kind of a two-part answer, if that's okay.
Of course.
Yeah. So don't get discouraged. Just keep going. And whatever it takes, get that first deal done. If you got to give up significant equity, don't be afraid to do it. Don't look at it as giving up equity. Look at it as creating opportunity, because truly, you get the first one done, the second one is so much easier.
Yeah.
So really do what you got to do to get that first one done.
Yeah, makes total sense. The law of the first deal is a real thing. It's I don't think I have heard of anyone who hit the first deal and then was like, now it's no good. Now I can't do it anymore. It just seems like,
you haven't done anything.
Right. Yeah. It's just everybody they did their first one, and then it's like, wow, this really does explode. So yeah, it's great. Just keep pushing for that point, and you'll eventually kind of hit that, inflection point. So, well, thank you, Tim. This is great. It's been a great talk. I really appreciate your time and having you on the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and sign off. Have a great day, everyone.
I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Balara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.